and hadana Allah. Praise be to God who guided us to this, and we would not have been guided had not Allah guided us. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي وَلَا اعْتِصَامِي وَلَا ثِقَتِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ وَمَا تَوَكُّلِي وَلَا اعْتِمَادِي إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ. Our success is only by God, we grasp on only to God, and we have confidence only in God. In God we trust, and upon God we rely. Alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastahdihi wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi nufusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil falan tajida lahu waliyan murshida. Praise be to God. We seek His help, we seek His guidance, we seek His forgiveness. We take refuge with God from the evils of ourselves and our misdeeds. Those whom Allah guides cannot be misguided, and those whom Allah misguides shall never find a friend to guide them. وَأَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. I testify that there is no God but Allah, alone and without partner. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ سَيِّدَنَا وَنَبِيَّنَا مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And I testify that our Master and our Prophet Muhammad is a slave and messenger. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala hadha al-nabiy al-kareem dhil qalb al-rahim al-mab'uthi rahmatan lil-alameen. May Allah send prayers and peace and blessings upon that noble messenger, that kind-hearted man sent as a mercy to the world. أما بعد فأوصيكم بتقوى الله فإن خير ما نتواصى به بيننا تقوى الله. To commence, I counsel you to be wary of Allah, for the best that we can advise each other to is taqwa. قال الله تعالى في محكم تنزيله ومن يتق الله يجعل له مخرجا. Allah tells us in the Quran, whoever is wary of Allah, Allah will give him an escape. We know, because Allah tells us, and from our own experience, that humanity has been created anxious and worried. Allah tells us, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوءًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. Indeed, mankind was created anxious. When evil afflicts him, he grieves, and when good afflicts him, he withholds, he keeps it to himself. So Allah has created us in this way. He has created us with those feelings. And therefore, we are not expected to be unhuman and to not have those feelings, to not feel anxious and to not feel worried. But rather, Allah gave us those feelings for a purpose. And our question is, what is that purpose? In the very next verse, or in the rest of the verse, Allah continues, and He says, إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, that everyone is anxious and worried except those who pray. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ, those who are constant in their prayers. But more literally, if we look at the language of this, because salah is from sila, from connection, we can read this as, except those that are connected to me, and never break that connection to Allah. So what this means is that when evil afflicts us, when we are troubled by something in our lives, it is natural to have an anxious response in ourselves. That dislike of what is happening is not solely from ourselves. It's not a wish that is only from us, that is in conflict with what Allah is doing to us. This is very important to understand. That feeling of dislike is not in conflict with whatever Allah is doing with us that we dislike. But rather, that feeling of dislike is itself from Allah. which Allah has created in us. And Allah has created that feeling in us as a response to whatever situation that He has placed us in, to help us choose to turn back to Allah in that situation. That is the purpose of that feeling. And if you turn back, that actually has a double positive effect now. It rids ourselves of that negative feeling. And also, it brings us into the pleasure of Allah. So if we understand that, if we understand that this is how our relationship to our own emotions should be, then we can move to look at this verse that we started with a little bit more closely. Allah tells us, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ, whoever is wary, whoever has taqwa of Allah. And taqwa has this sense of shielding yourself, of being on your guard, of being very mindful and wary that something could get you in any moment. And that means, if this is what taqwa is really about, then that means that we first must know what are we or who are we on our guard from. And here, when we talk about taqwa, for the most part, we are on our guard against anything that we might do that displeases Allah. But here we can take one step back, because we have to talk about who Allah is. He is the one, the omnipotent creator of everything, who has power over everything. And this is really important for us. There can be no trust in Allah. There can be no reliance upon Allah unless we recognize that He is the one and only being that has power in all of existence. So there's no such thing as reliance without that. I cannot rely on my own parents. I cannot rely on my children. I cannot rely on anyone else in my life. Not on the scholars in this world, on no one. Not in the true sense of the word. Because they can't do anything for me. They can't enable me to pray or fast. They can't bring me to paradise. And even if they somehow had such an ability, then they're going to die. And then who will you rely upon then? So what that means is the only being that we can actually rely upon is the one who is one and all-powerful. And this is why the ideas of Tawheed and Tawakol, the idea of believing God to be one and trusting in Him, are so united. Without Tawheed, without understanding that God is the one and all-powerful, there cannot be Tawakol. So then we can go back and look at this verse again. Whoever is weary of Allah, then Allah will give him an escape. So we might ask, why will Allah not give an escape to those who are not weary of Him, who don't have taqwa? Why doesn't He give them an escape? Those people that fall into His displeasure and into disobedience. And this is because we turn back to our emotions. If we disobey, as Muslims, we should feel a sense of shame. That shame is a good thing. It is a sign of our faith. It's a negative emotion that's meant to turn us back to Allah. So, when we feel that shame, one of two things can happen. They can either be fixed by us turning back to Allah, and that will rid us of our shame. Or we can leave that shame within us and do nothing. And that shame will eventually inscribe a little black dot in our hearts. And then it will fester a bit, and our hearts will slowly be closed to Allah. And the shame will fester more, and it will grow in ourselves until we can no longer bear it. We can no longer bear that feeling within ourselves. And we say, I don't want to feel shameful. And eventually that becomes, I should not feel shameful. And that opens more doors. Because the only way not to feel shame is to say that there is no God, or that there is no God that's worthy of being worshipped, or the God that's out there is not a true God and something else. That's really the only other way, besides turning back to Allah, that you can get rid of that feeling in your heart. So this blackness in our heart, it grows, and it grows, and it grows. And we are doing that to ourselves by not turning back, by not responding in the way our emotions are telling us to respond. So if you do not guard your heart with the shield of taqwa, Allah might give you an escape. But because of the condition of your heart, you will not realize what He has given you. You will not recognize it. But really, you only turn further away. And you might feel for a time that I have escaped this difficulty. I have escaped this feeling. And perhaps you've escaped it, but now you are further away from Allah and you're in a much greater difficulty, even if you don't realize. And this is why there is no escape for the one that does not have taqwa. It's not because of Allah, it's because of us. So we must be firm then on trying to protect our hearts and on guarding ourselves. If we do that, and if we understand that we can turn to Allah in our difficulties, then Allah will give us a way out and we will recognize that way out. But it will be a true way out, a way that saves us from the difficulty now and from a greater difficulty later. And that is what Allah can give us. And so, one of the early sages of our tradition, Abu Ali al-Daqqaq, he says, there are 3 levels of tawakkul, of trusting in God, trusting that He can give you a way out. And we can take these all 3 of these from this one verse, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَخْرُجْ, that if you have taqwa of Allah, then He can give you a way out. First, there is tawakkul because you are secure in His promise. Allah in this verse is promising us a way out. He says, if you maintain taqwa, you will have a way out. If we recognize then that the trial is from Allah and that He wants to test our response, we will stay patient or we will stay content through that trial because we know that it will come to an end, that Allah has promised that it will come to an end, and we know that Allah will reward us if we are patient or we are content, as He has promised. And that is what it means to be secure in His promise. And of course, we know that He can do this, again, because He is the only one in existence that has the power and the ability to act on that promise. That's the first level of tawakkul that's hidden in this verse. There's another level, a higher level, that is tawakkul because you think that it is sufficient that Allah knows. That Allah knows of your condition and that is it. So here, you feel no need to complain to Allah. Just as the Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ did not complain to Allah about being thrown into the fire, because he knew that Allah knew of his state, and that was sufficient for him. Because Allah is in control, and because Allah knows what is happening, therefore I will be fine. There's nothing to worry about. So at the first level of tawakkul, God's promise is enough. In the second level, God's knowledge is enough. In the third level, we can say that tawakkul is being completely content with Allah's decree. And in this case, we might phrase this as saying that God is enough. Just Allah is enough by himself. The fact that whatever trial that we are in, or whatever tribulation that we are in, or whatever evil has afflicted us is from Allah is enough for us. We might feel the pain, but Allah has placed an exit within the very pain itself. And that exit is the fact that the pain is from Allah and not from anyone else. And we know, of course, that Allah and everything that he does is wise and perfect and with good reason. And this is a form of love. We have gone all the way up to love. That no matter what a person you love does to you, if it is true love, then you only love that action because it comes from your beloved. And that is enough for you. And that is the highest form of tawakkul. But all three qualify as being tawakkul, whether you're at the first level or the second level or the third level. God's promise being enough, or his knowledge being enough, or God himself being enough. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم. Having said this, I ask for Allah's forgiveness. الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. Praise be to Allah. We testify that there is no God but Allah alone and without partner. May prayers and peace be upon his chosen messenger. To gain tawakkul, then we've really already been told what we must do. Right? Get to know Allah and stay on your toes. And what I mean is not get to know Allah generally. I don't mean get to know what the different attributes of Allah are or the different names of Allah. That's important. And it's a very important thing to understand in general that God is all-powerful and that God is one and all the other names and attributes. But what I mean deeper than that is to know Allah through your own life. Look back at your life and look at your blessings versus your difficulties. Weigh them against each other. Ask yourself, which one is heavier? Do I have more blessings or do I have more difficulties throughout the course of my life? And weigh them without a sort of recency bias, but in a really serious way. How many years of blessings do you have versus how many years of tribulation do you have? And in the years of tribulation and the years of difficulty, were they really completely absent of blessings? Or if you count the blessings of those times as well, were there more blessings, but you just took them for granted? Or was there actually more hardship? It could be true. And then look and ask, those times of difficulty, did they eventually yield something good? Because everything in your life has led to you as you are right now. And you as you are, of course, right now, is going to lead to something else, to whoever you will be in the future. But if we take this time to reflect upon our own lives, we would see, undoubtedly, every single person in the world, the benevolence of Allah towards us. So what I mean when I say get to know Allah is get to know the Allah that has been there for you your whole life. That's the first thing. The second, as we said, Allah tells us to be wary of him, to have taqwa. So to avoid his displeasure, to strive for his pleasure, to make sure that we're not doing things that he has asked us not to do. Because it's only then when we work to bring ourselves into line with what He has asked of us, it is only then that we will become aware of the escape that He is constantly providing us. He has provided us to us our whole life. He is providing to us right now, and He will continue to provide for us in the future. And you won't see it immediately. It's a slow process of mujahada, of struggling against yourself, of choosing one thing a week or one thing a day or even one thing a month, and slowly working to change that within yourself to be in line with what Allah has asked of us. And so it will take time, and it will take practice, and it will take failure, and it will take turning to Allah again and again and again. But eventually, it will open up and the escape will be there. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tardah. We ask Allah to grace us with that which He loves and is pleased with. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Allahumma wa arda an Sadatina Abi Bakr wa Umar wa Uthman wa Ali. Wa arda Allahumma an al-Hasan wa an Hussein wa an ummihima Fatima al-Zahra. وعن الصحابة أجمعين وعن أزواج نبيك أمهات المؤمنين وعن التابعين وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. May Allah send prayers and peace upon our Prophet Muhammad. May He be pleased with our masters Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, as well as Hassan and Hussein, their mother Fatima al-Zahra, the rest of the companions, the mothers of the believers, and those that follow them in goodness until the day of reckoning. We ask that Allah be pleased with us as well, out of His vast mercy. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من عذاب جهنم ومن عذاب القبر ومن فتنة المحيا والممات ومن شر فتنة المسيح الدجال. We ask that Allah give us refuge with Him from the punishment of the fire, the torment of the grave, the trials of life and death, and from the evil tribulation of the Dajjal, the Antichrist. وبعد فإن الله تعالى يقول إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. To conclude, Allah says, surely Allah commands justice, excellence, and charity to relatives, and He forbids indecency, vice, and injustice. He warns you so that you may take heed. Waqim as-salah.